in California. So if you're looking to get your real estate license or your broker's license, so you're stepping up from being a realtor into being a broker, you're going to need to know all this stuff. And so what I'm doing is I'm going through the principles course. We're on chapter 6. I'm using the book I always use, which is Principles by Walt Hubert. And it's this one, and that is the 15th edition. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask me. But it's the one I've been going through for a long time. I got kind of a hiccup when I got to Landlord, Tenant, and the world got busy and I got a little slow, but we're back, and I'll just shut up and get going. How about that? So we are on page 174, 175. Page 174 is just the 3-day pay rent or quit. Now, most of these forms you can get by going online and Googling it. Sometimes you have to pay for them, but if you know a local realtor, they're allowed to let you use their forms as long as, they let you know that I'm not, what I do when somebody wants to use my forms is I have them sign a non-agency agreement. So make sure that if you're a realtor and you're going to let somebody use your forms, you have them also sign a non-agency agreement that's going to protect you so that if it's filled out wrong and they try to blame you, it's not your fault. Okay. So the 3-day pay rent or quit is on page 174. Remember, when there's times of dire need or something happens like COVID, they will change the 3-day pay rent or quit like they did during COVID. I believe it was 18 days. So going on to page 175, we're talking about a lease is terminated 15 days after a notice of belief of abandonment. I was going to look that up before I got on here because I know when I did the notice of abandonment in California, my attorney made me do 18 days. So if somebody abandoned your property, it's not like you can go in there and just clean it out and start going at it. You have to post a notice of termination. I believe you abandoned the property, and that has to be up there. According to the book, it's 15 days. I did 18 days because my attorney told me to. But yeah, don't just walk on in like you own the place, even though you do. How about that? So it says, notice of belief of abandonment was personally served or posted in a conspicuous place. That means the front door or on the front of the garage. It says door, window, on the premises, or 18 days, there it is, 18 days after the notice was deposited in the mail. This will occur unless the lessee pays the rent or notifies the landlord that the premises have not been vacated or abandoned, and he or she does not wish to surrender the leasehold estate. The next one, so as far as I know, the notice of abandonment is definitely on your state exam. Then there's termination, breach of conditions. The violation of any condition of a lease is a breach of the contract and may terminate the agreement. Both the lessee and the lessor, remember EE is the renter, OR is the homeowner, have the responsibility of being informed of all contractual conditions and understand that violations of the conditions may be cause for termination. Then we have termination, destruction of the premises. So breach of conditions and destruction of the premises, I have not seen on either the salesperson's exam or the broker's exam. But you should know about these things if you're going to do property management or you're going to be an investor yourself. Termination, destruction of the premises. If a structure is destroyed, I haven't had that happen yet. There is usually, I know, bite my tongue. There is usually a clause in the contract that automatically terminates the lease. If the damage is light, the tenant may stay while the landlord makes repairs. The leasee has the right to vacate the lease if the property is condemned. Hi, how you doing? Welcome. So also selling an apartment building. Also, you guys might be doing that. Selling an apartment building does not terminate the lease of the tenants in possession. So one of the things that people do a lot when they're selling a piece of property, if it's a duplex, a fourplex, whatever, if it's a rental, a lot of times they try to get the tenants out. Now that's really not the best way to go because the valuation of the property is based on how much rental income's coming in. And if you have no rental income coming in, then you have no value of the property. That's a whole nother story when we talk about appraisal. And that's what we talk about in the class I teach on the weekends and during the week. So we only teach every other weekend and we also teach every other week. So this week I'm not teaching during the week and next week I will be. And that's Monday through Thursday from 6 p.m. to 9:30. And that class will help you pass your broker's exam and your sales exam, either or. So just want to let you know, because that's what we're here for, to help you all pass your licensing exam. And we have had people pass their licensing exam from other states, because California is one of the hardest ones. So special purpose leases, and you have to be careful with special purpose leases. In this section, we cover unique types of leases designed to meet specific needs. And the sales leaseback is absolutely that. You know, it's really, really hard when you're managing how to get somebody out of their home into their new home, or when you're trying to get your person in and you're waiting for the seller to get out. And sometimes the seller has problems and they can't get out on time. And if that happens, what you do is a sales leaseback. I really dislike doing a sales leaseback, probably because one time we did a sales leaseback and the guy wouldn't move out. And that starts a whole nother problem. Now, when you do a sales leaseback, it depends on what kind of loan you're getting. If you're getting an owner-occupied loan and you have a contract that says the seller is doing a sales leaseback of 90 days, then the lender will not fund your owner-occupied. So you're going to have to do a maximum of 60 days. Now, that's like nowhere in any of the books. That's from my little head. So going on with the sales leaseback. A sales leaseback occurs when an owner sells their property to another party and leases it back for a stated period of time. The original owner becomes the lessee, got it? And the new owner becomes the lessor. This is also a financing device, but it is used mostly for commercial buildings where large businesses are involved. So like on the state exam, the sales leaseback is a hardware store. And what happens is the guy realizes he's paying too much taxes, and he owns the building and he owns the hardware store inside of it. So he's paying so much taxes, he doesn't know what to do. So he goes to his CPA, who I hate to say doesn't give him very good advice. But on the state exam, the advice he gets is to sell the building and lease it back. That will give him a write-off of 100% of the rent he's paying, because the rent he's paying is the cost of doing business. So now he has a huge write-off, but he doesn't have the building anymore. So I wonder what happens with the capital gains. So, you know, I guess he could have sold the building and did a 1031 tax exchange. That would be a good idea. But I'm not a CPA. I'm just a real estate broker. And as an investor too, what I would have done is I would have formed a new corporation. I would have sold my building to my new corporation, and I would have leased back from my corporation. So now I'm leasing, so I still get to write off 100%. But then I still own the property, I still get to gain the equity. So there's all kinds of ways to work around it. You just have to talk to a CPA or give me a call. I'm so excited to always help investors. And it's funny because I see classes that people have to take. Like they pay lots of money to take real estate investing classes. And if you use me as the realtor on your first couple of deals, you don't have to pay me anything else extra. My commission is my pay to help you. I mean, I should have that kind of knowledge. If you're an investor and you want to be an investor, use somebody who's an investor. If you want to flip homes, use somebody who's flipped homes. I know every way to save a buck on a flip. So always when you're thinking about doing something that has to do with real estate, use somebody who's done everything that you're trying to do. So the first thing I did was I was doing pyramiding, where you buy a property, you wait till it gets equity, and you take the money out. But let's get back to the leases, because we got to get through chapter 6. So on the sales leaseback, you lease back the property. Remember, never write in the contract more than 60 days or your lender will not let you do the loan. So large investors, like I said, I did say this part, large investors such as insurance companies and pension funds will purchase a building such as a property, provided they get well-written long-term lease. Of course, the credit rating and financial position of the lessee must be outstanding. This is a device that nets a high rental income to the investor and allows the business a better cash flow. Chain stores are the ones that normally do that, such as a department store, a discount store uses this device frequently. So that's not going to be on your state exam, that little section right there on page 175. But if you want to read it again so you can kind of understand it, if you're thinking about doing commercial real estate. So commercial and residential are totally different animals. They should actually have a commercial exam versus a residential exam. Lease with a purchase option. These are super cool. And a lot of people are scared to ask for it, but you have to be the person that has a fiduciary duty to your client so that your client can get an awesome deal. So I listen to people all the time about what they want and what their wants and needs are. And one of my agents, her and her husband wanted to buy so bad. And she has a great job with great income, and so does he, but he just started his business. And she told me what they were looking for when they move, and they're like, but we're not ready yet. And then she got a listing appointment, and I went with her on the listing appointment. I got out of the car and I looked at her and I said, this is your house. This is what you and your husband described to me. And here we are at the listing appointment. But we can't count his income yet because his business isn't at least 2 years old. So long story short, we got in there, we talked to the sellers, we got to know them a little bit. We asked them if they would consider a lease with an option to buy. And guess what? My real estate agent who works with me now lives in that home. And they did a lease with an option to buy, a 2-year lease so that her husband could get his 2-year history. And once the 2-year history is over, we're going to go ahead and finance it, and they purchase the property. So a lease with an option to buy could be something that you could use if you can't qualify now, but you see that what you're doing in 2 years, you're going to be able to qualify. And you just make sure that you do what you're supposed to do so that you can get there. So the lease with a purchase with an option to buy, the lease purchase option exists only when a tenant leases a property with the option to purchase it at a later date. So you're actually doing a lease and you're doing a purchase, and you're picking the price now and you're picking the time frame. And then what happens is with a lease with an option to purchase, the people who are the buyers, they have the option. So because they have the option, the seller doesn't have a choice. So let's say that you set the price at 800 grand, but when they go to do the option, the house is worth $1.5 million. Well, they still have to sell it for 800 grand. On the other side, if the buyers feel, well, maybe this neighborhood wasn't for us, it's too far from our work, or, the price is good, but maybe we should look at other stuff, and they don't take the option, then the seller gets it back. But it all depends on what the people with the option are going to do. So I'm trying to see how much time I've been on, and it has a stupid thing on my screen showing me that I have a class coming, and I'm like, I don't want to see that. So anyway, I don't have a class coming today at 6 p.m., so I'm just going to keep going. So on the credit crunch, so they're talking about the credit crunch that happened. It said the credit crunch slump in making lease purchase options more popular in the alternate financing method. So when there was a credit crunch and when we're having hard times with interest rates, and back in the 80s when interest rates weren't really high, what basically happened is people did what we call creative financing. And through creative financing came the lease with the option to buy, which you do have to know for the state exam, but also the wraparound. And the wraparound is something that's also on most state exams. A wraparound is when a seller does a carryback and doesn't pay off his loan. So like he sells the house, he conveys the property. You have to understand these words because they're going to be on your state exam. Convey means to transfer. So the seller conveys, and that means transfers the property to the buyer, but he does not pay off his loan. Now that only happened in the late 1970s, early 80s, because the banks learned that they need to have a due on sale clause. So I have so much to teach you, and I just want to make sure that I come on. We have, let's see, we're on page 176, and we're almost done because next thing we're gonna see is the contracts, and then we'll have the summary and the questions and answers at the end of chapter 6, and we'll get to go into chapter 7. Have an amazing rest of your evening. Make sure you follow me, subscribe, share me, because all the people you know are gonna wanna learn how to build wealth in real estate, learn how to get their license, or maybe get their broker's license, or even if you go to passwithsharon.com, you'll see that we help mortgage loan officers become loan officers. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comment. Look forward to seeing you again.